Some huge clubs never won the Champions League. And when you line them up, the near misses, the heartbreak, and the history make this one of football's best debates. At number 10, Fiorentina. This is one of those clubs that feels bigger than its European record says. They were already mixing with Europe's elite in the 1950s, and in 1957 they reached the European Cup final. That alone puts them in serious company because back then, getting there meant you were one of the strongest teams on the continent. The problem is simple. They ran into Real Madrid and lost, like so many others in that era. Fiorentina also kept building a big identity through Serie A history, with iconic players and a fan base that gives the club real weight. With all due respect to some smaller one-run finalists, Fiorentina have lasting stature. They may not be the closest team to the trophy, but they absolutely belong on this list. Number 9 is Leeds United. Their European Cup case comes from one great era, but it was a seriously powerful one. Under Don Revie, Leeds became one of the toughest sides in Europe, and by 1975, they had reached the final. For a club with that level of domestic strength and that kind of reputation, not winning the biggest prize still feels strange. That 1975 final loss to Bayern is the moment that defines their place here. Leeds had already won league titles, played hard, played smart, and looked built for a European crown. Compared with some clubs below them, they did not have as many deep runs across different decades. But their peak was real, and it was elite. One European Cup would have completed the picture. At 8, Stade de Reims. Younger fans may not think of them first, but early European Cup history does. Reims were one of the first major teams of the tournament and reached the final twice, in 1956 and 1959. That matters, because those first years helped define what the competition would become, and Reims were right at the center of it. The unlucky part is obvious. Both final defeats came against the great Real Madrid side. So their story is half achievement, half bad timing. In pure historical importance, Reims have a stronger case than many clubs with more modern hype. They do not rank higher because the elite level did not last across eras. Still, as early giants without the cup, they are impossible to ignore. Number 7 is Bayer Leverkusen, and the nickname says a lot, Neverkusen. This club has been good enough for the top level more than once, and in 2002 they came painfully close to the Champions League title. They reached the final, had a brilliant team, and still ended that season without the trophy. For modern fans, they are one of the clearest examples of a big club that just could not finish the job. Everybody remembers that 2002 campaign, especially the final against Real Madrid and Zidane's volley. Leverkusen were also runners-up in the Bundesliga and the DFB Pokal that year, which made the whole story even more brutal. Compared with some older historic names, their European identity is more modern and less decorated. But as a sustained top-level project without the biggest cup, they are a very easy pick for this ranking. At 6, Monaco. They are a different kind of club on this list because they have not always lived among Europe's biggest giants. But when Monaco hit their peak, they can look like a serious Champions League threat. The clearest example was 2004, when they reached the final with a team full of pace, quality, and belief. They have also had several other strong European periods around that run. That 2004 journey is still one of the most memorable underdog runs of the modern era, even if Porto stopped them in the final. Add in the club's record of developing top players and building exciting sides, and you get a team that has repeatedly mattered in Europe. They edge a few others because their highs came in a more competitive era. No title, but definitely not a small European story. Number 5 is Borussia Mönchengladbach. This is not just a club with one deep European run. Gladbach were a serious force in the 1970s, won 5 German titles, lifted 2 UEFA Cups, and reached the European Cup final in 1977. In that decade, they were one of the best teams in Europe, full stop. That is why they rank this high. Their issue was timing and competition. They shared an era with Bayern's dominance in Germany and some huge names across the continent, and in the 1977 final they lost to Liverpool. Even so, their overall level was probably more sustained than some clubs above and below them. Another team could argue on pure fame, but Gladbach's football weight is massive. For me, they are one of the strongest titleless clubs ever. At 4, Roma. This is where the list starts to feel really heavy. Roma are one of Europe's genuinely big historic clubs, with a massive city, huge support, and enough quality across different eras to feel like they should have won Champions League by now. The big chance came in 1984, when they reached the European Cup final and had the dream scenario of playing it at home in Rome. And that is exactly what makes the miss hurt even more. Roma lost that final to Liverpool on penalties at the Stadio Olimpico, which still feels like one of the cruelest near misses in European Cup history. Compared with some clubs below them, Roma carry more long-term stature and bigger modern relevance. They have had other strong European teams too, just never the final breakthrough. For a club this big, 0 is still shocking. Number 3 is Valencia, and their case is brutally strong. Very few clubs without a Champions League can say they reached back-to-back finals, but Valencia did exactly that in 2000 and 2001. That alone puts them in rare territory. At their best around the turn of the century, they were organized, hard to break, and good enough to beat almost anyone in Europe. The first final ended in a heavy defeat to Real Madrid. Then the second one slipped away on penalties against Bayern. 2 straight chances, no trophy. That is a huge reason they rank so high. With all due respect to Roma and Gladbach, Valencia's combination of recency and repeated final appearances is hard to top. If this list was only about getting close, they would be right at the very top. At number 2, Arsenal. Some people will want them first because, in terms of club size, consistency, and global profile, they are bigger than almost everyone else on this list. But in pure Champions League terms, the case is just slightly weaker than the team at number 1. Arsenal only reached one final, in 2006, yet the scale of the club keeps them this high. That 2006 run was built on a ridiculous defensive record, and even in the final against Barcelona, Arsenal were still in it after going down to 10 men. They lost 2-1, and that remains the closest the club has come to Europe's biggest prize. Compared with Valencia, Arsenal have fewer final appearances but more overall club weight. One of football's biggest institutions still missing the one trophy that would complete everything. And at number 1, Atletico Madrid. This is the most obvious answer on the whole list. 3 lost finals in 1974, 2014, and 2016. No other major club without the trophy has been this close this many times. Add in their status in Spanish football, their Champions League consistency in the modern era, and the case becomes almost impossible to argue against. The 2014 final is the one that really seals it. Atletico were seconds away from winning the Champions League before Sergio Ramos scored in stoppage time. And 2 years later, they lost another final to Real Madrid on penalties. That is unbearable level of heartbreak. Arsenal are bigger globally, Valencia had 2 straight finals, but Atletico have the strongest near-miss record of all. They are the biggest club never to win it. So that is the list. 10 huge clubs, loads of history, loads of pain, and still no Champions League title. Some were unlucky, some just ran into monsters, but Atletico stand alone when it comes to pure heartbreak. Now it is your turn. Which club should be higher, which team is too high, and who is missing from the ranking completely? Drop your top 10 in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe for more football rankings every week.